Well, hey guys, got here on the 60 again, back out here, early morning. It's the final push on this car before a big show out in Lebanon, Tennessee. Got a few things we're going to handle this morning. One being a reservoir tank for the radiator. I was working on that car. We was doing that fan shroud in that car. I noticed that old reservoir was kindly busted up. Lid was busted on it. It was still holding fluid, but it was rough. It was nasty. So I figured we'd do a little video on making a new one. I've seen a lot of videos, guys make these things on YouTube and stuff out of different things. I've seen Monster cans, Jack Daniel bottles, just different stuff like that. I've made these before, and I'm going to make one for this one. Actually, the one on my Cadillac we made out of a stainless water bottle. Got it for like a flea market or somewhere like that. So I have a bottle inside that we wasn't using, and I think that we'll use it. So basically it's just drilling a hole in the lid and getting the hose to fit tight in there. Now I've done this a couple of different ways. You can drill that hole in the lid and you can put a couple of barbs and hook the hoses onto the barbs and do it that way. On my Cadillac, I basically just drilled a tight hole and ran that hose straight down in there, and it's up about 2 inches from the bottom. Put a little fluid in it and a weep hole or a vent hole, whatever you want to call it, to let it breathe, and they work fine. I mean, I've never had any issue out of that one, and I've never had any issue out of the ones I use barbs on. But for this one, I don't think I'm going to do barbs. The lid's a little different on this one, so we'll just drill a hole in it and we'll make a bracket. I got to make a bracket to mount it, and run the hose over there and run it in there and let it ride, and I think it'll be fine. I got a little bottle here from the house. It's kind of got a cool shape to it, and you can see this lid is a little different on this. It's like a painted gray bottle. May leave it this color, may paint it black, may paint it the color of the body. I don't know. Most likely would paint it black if we don't just leave it this color. I happen to think that this color's fine, but you know, when we get under the hood and start cleaning that up, my feelings may change on that. So let's get started with this. Got a few things left right now as far as the car being ready to, in my opinion, to go to the show. My bottom running lights, blinkers, they need to be wired up. I need to put the air cleaner back on the car, hook up the PCV valve. I need to do a little bit of work in the back on the interior, in the back seat. I think she's going to come out here and do some of that. Got a little bit there to do. Get this bottle mounted in there and basically just polish the trim up. She's ready to go at that point. I'm going to try to, I've got another day, tomorrow, Sunday, if I can get this pressing work done today. Water bottle, a little bit on the interior. Got a little bit of paint too. We missed this. I knew that it needed to be painted, and I just lost sight of it and forgot. And the other day when we were out test driving the car, I noticed it. But you can see right here on the inside of the door, around the window, this bluish gray that's left from the original interior. I gotta paint that. I've got to paint that. So that's on the agenda. I've got me a list up here on the whiteboard of things that I have to get done. List in blue is for Bubba's car. Tip of the day, get you a whiteboard. Them things work out great. That great big one I actually got from my job. They were throwing it out. they let me take it home. I hung it on the wall. I've had a whiteboard in my garages for a long time. Just makes things simple. To-do list, measurements, write them down real quick. Part numbers, you can just scribble on there and wipe it off. So that's a good option. I also want to talk a little bit about this trim. Now, you remember this trim right here was not on the car, and as you can see now, it's on tight. I kind of just did that on the whim, and this piece right here on the trunk wasn't on. Those pieces, the clips were badly rotted and decayed, so I just kind of did this on the whim the other night, and I should have made a video of how we done it. But this right here's what's left of the original clip. You can see it's gone. This stop right here was actually threaded. And basically what we did was we just took some scrap sheet metal I had under the workbench, and we just cut some squares. Thought I had one. Oh, I do right here. Just basically cut some squares like this and drilled a hole in them. And once we drilled that hole, we took a bolt, fed it through the hole. Now that trim has lips on the inside, and what'll happen is the clip will slide into the trim, into those cavities, and it can't turn either way. It's just kind of hung right there, but it'll slide back and forth. The trim will actually slide off of it. So we made those, dropped the bolt through and welded them. So you've got a hole in here, right down in here, and that clip is riding inside this. You see how this is rolled on the edges? That's that cavity that sits in. So it's in that cavity. You've got your bolt welded to it, head ground off, and it drops through the body. Then the trim slides over it, and it locks it in place. Pretty simple to make, wasn't too bad. We ended up making 2 here for each side, and 3 for that trunk lid piece. So it wasn't too bad. I mean, about an hour's worth of work right there to make the clips, to get them right where they wouldn't move. But again, that's a big money saver, because those clips are very expensive online, and they're kindly hard to find the right ones. I had looked and looked and looked, and I had found them, but they were expensive. So I just elected to go ahead and try to make some, and picked up an air cleaner over at the Advance for this car. The one that we had on here that came with it was a big Edelbrock. It was a 14-inch, but the 14-inch wouldn't work after adding the power brakes because of the vacuum hose to the booster. So we picked that one up over at Advance. Just a cheap little deal. That's the right size. That's a 10-inch. I got a PCB valve thrown in it. I got to plumb it up when I put the air cleaner back on for the last time. So enough about all that. That's just kind of a breakdown of what we got left to do and what we've done. So we will get started on this reservoir. And we're going to have to make a bracket. We'll have to make a bracket right in here. And I'm thinking about mounting it right here, and we're basically just going to have a bracket. It'll drop down. That tank will be clamped to it, either with a basic hose clamp or zip tie, something like that. I'm going to make the bracket where it has support. It'll just be a basic L bracket on top, a couple of screws right down the top of the radiator support, and I may bend the bottom of that bracket so the bottle will actually sit on the bottom of it to give it a little more support, keep it from moving around, stuff like that. So let's get started with that and see how that goes. Anyway, maybe we can get some of this stuff knocked out today. Get y'all on stand. Alright, drew out a couple of lines right here. Found a pre-bent piece of metal is already laying under the bench. I can use this pre-bent lip right here that's, I'd use it for something else, but it's scrap. I can go ahead and use this bend to connect to the top of the radiator support. I drew out a couple of lines right here, and the first line is where I want this to sit when it's mounted. Leaves the top open to take off, put on. This second line is my cut line, so I'll cut it right here. Once I cut it here, I'll put a 90-degree bend in this right here so it sits on it. Now obviously I'm not going to leave it this wide, so we'll mark out the width of it now. And this thing really don't need to be, you know, it don't really need to stick out. The bracket don't around this jug. So just get this lined up right here, and I'll put me a cut line here. Let's see, maybe right there. Let me measure the distance. Yeah, 2.5 will work. 2.5 inches wide should be fine. So I'll put my lines here. I'll put my lines here. I get my line up here. Alright, there's my cut line. So I'll get this cut up and then we'll bend that bottom out.
Okay, notice I didn't cut this line because I didn't mark this line all the way across because this is not my cut line, this is my bend line. So now I'm going to cut this length off of here.
this is what we're left with right here. So we'll go ahead and put the bend in. Put this bend in there. I'm going to use this small metal brake picked up from Harbor Freight. It's just a tabletop mount, and basically you just stick the metal in and then it breaks it up just like that. I have to get some clamps to clamp it on right here. You can pick this up pretty cheap. It comes in handy for small stuff like this. So let's see here. You basically just line your bend line up with the brake line in this small brake. So right there's our bend line. So, and here I go, I'm fixing to bend that in the wrong direction. I need to put this bend line on the other side. So let me mark it on the other side. That bend line's right at 4 inches. Couple clamps. I gotta get a couple of clamps. Basic C clamps, just clamp this down. Just something to basically hold it, you know, this top piece from moving. Wipe that off. what you end up with. We'll have to cut our length off the bottom of this. But now you can kind of get a good idea of how this is actually going to work in the car. It'll sit just like this right here. I have a magnet right there. We'll cut this edge off right here and clean that up. And then what we'll have is we'll have a band hose clamp, zip tie, something holding it in here. We cut it low enough here where our bolts are going to be and our radiator mount, so we could get this lid on and off without interfering with that. And then the next thing we'll end up doing is drilling a hole right in the center of this lid for the hose, and then we'll put a vent hole in there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this now while I've got it staged up here, and I'll cut the bottom off. Bingo. One bracket. Easy to do. Maybe took 20 minutes. Scrap metals for free, you know, laying around. Jug out of the house. Could pick one up at a flea market, yard sale, anywhere. Real cheap way of doing this. No reason to go on Amazon and at the very low end spend $25, $30. You can do this at home. You can do it cheap. You can use stuff from around the house. If we can paint this black, we can clean this gray up. Either way, it looks great. You're not going to be able to tell that it's something, not an aftermarket piece. So now the only thing left to do now is to mount this bracket with 2 sheet metal screws in the radiator support and paint this bracket black and drill our hole. So I'll do that. I'll get this mounted, then we're going to put it off for paint, and I'll go ahead and drill a hole in here and drill a weep hole, and I'll show you what that looks like. After this dries, we'll come back, we'll mount it, and I'll show everybody what it looks like. Alright, we got the bracket painted. I went ahead and mounted it, and the only thing that I did to this jug was just drill a hole. Now this jug lid on this jug, when you open this, it's like this deep. It's hollowed in the center. the hose goes all the way through. You'll see right here I've got a small hole. This is a vent hole. And when you make these, you have to put a vent hole in there. Basically all I did after I made the bracket, I just put a couple of self-tappers right into the radiator support, and I used a hose clamp down here to fasten that jug to that bracket that I made earlier. Turned out pretty good. Went ahead and zip tied our hose up through here, cleaned it up. So we're making progress. Update on my fan shroud. I did go ahead and cut it back a little bit from last time. I cut it back and just sunk it back in this way, and I went ahead and bolted it on top. I made these brackets right here too to support the bottom of this thing, because what it does is when you rev the engine and it starts to draw that air, this material is thin and it wanted to pull in down here. So my solution to that was to cut it off and just shorten it, the width of it. And then I just made these basically just tie cable brackets on each side and put a nice piece of door trim on the edge to make it look real clean. So that's, you know, this was free, can't beat that. Buddy give me this. I keep this door edge, I use it for a lot of stuff when it comes to metal. I use it for a lot of things other than what it was intended for. It's cheap, and you know, you can really clean up a nice edge. I mean, look what it done for this. Made this look real nice and tight. So I had this hose laying here. I always try to keep a little bit of gas hose, you know, or some kind of, you know, vacuum gas hose, something that'll in the drawer at all times. So I had this, so we went ahead and put a new piece of hose. This was in the house, we wasn't using it, so that's a freebie. And then bracket was made out of scrap metal. So we done all this right here, tightened all this up, basically for nothing other than time. And I mean, even if you had to buy it, I mean, this metal would cost you a little bit, obviously. But you can pick these jugs up anywhere, flea market, yard sale, Amazon, Walmart, dollar store, it don't matter. You can get them relatively cheap everywhere. And then just a piece of scrap metal make you a bracket and hose clamp. So we got that buttoned up, all that's done now. I did paint the inside of the door. We got those painted, these edges that I was talking about earlier. We got those painted, that's out of the way. And we also buttoned up and tightened up the inner edges of the back, around the back glass. So we're getting there. Marked a lot of stuff off my list. Got a little bit to go. But we should have this thing tightened up probably by this afternoon. But for now, that'll be all. And hopefully next time you see the car, we'll do a complete walk around of it, and it'll be done. Oh, I talked about this morning, putting these pieces on, and showed how I made those clips, because those clips are expensive if you got to buy them. Now it's time consuming to make these, but it's definitely worth it if you save like $50–$60 for a whole bag of clips. And I just made my scrap metal, so we're getting pretty good about just using scraps laying around, left everywhere. Because I mean, if you're building these cars, you're building a rat rod, that's what you want to use anyway. You don't put a lot of money into it. Now if you're doing nut and bolt restoration and a $8,000 paint job, buy the clips. Definitely buy the clips, and buy you a nice chrome fan shroud, and buy you a nice reservoir tank. But you know, if you're just building rat rods like we're doing, this stuff works great, it's fine, and it's cheap and free. So there you go. So until next time, hopefully we'll be showing this thing done. So hey, obviously don't buy something if you can make it, especially out of scrap, for free.